Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for coming. Thank you, Claire, for inviting me to give a presentation here. I'm Carolyn Larcombe. I'm the Conservation Manager for Wandiyali Restoration Trust, which is a not-for-profit registered environmental organisation looking after some land locally. Today I'm going to talk about the work that we're doing on the local catchment. So this is just a little bit about, talks a tiny bit about the Trust and the aims of the Trust, looking after country restoration, education, scientific research. These pictures are some of the areas that we're looking after. The top is what's known as Poplar's grasslands, natural temperate grasslands just down here near Jerrabomberra. And the bottom two are of Wandiyali and Verona, which is where we'll be visiting later on today. Boxgum grassy woodland. These are all taken this season. It's been a pretty amazing season. Classic boxgum with yellow box and regenerating other eucalypts. And then the bottom one is our kangaroo grass, which has had the biggest flowering season this year for over 20 years. So here we are situated in the broader landscape. I do have a little pointer thing. That's Wandiyali and Verona. Here we are at Googong, here. And here we are sitting between the Molonglo River, the catchments of the Molonglo River, Queanbeyan, Jerrabomberra Creek and the Murrumbidgee River there. Obviously here the Queanbeyan River flows into the Molonglo and into Lake Burley-Griffin, and Jerrabomberra Creek flows into Jerrabomberra wetlands and then into Lake Burley-Griffin. What we look at here, or where we sit in the landscape, we see us sitting in a really interesting junction of connectivity, I guess. So we've got north-south connections along the Queanbeyan River, Tinderi Mountain, the Tinderi and the Molonglo ranges, and along the Murrumbidgee corridor as well. And then there's the Jerrabomberra Creek corridor through the middle there. And what we've also got cross-hatching that is the east-west corridor from the Brindabellas across this country here and down to the coastal ranges and then up the coast. And I look at the east-west connectivity in particular because it's where we see all of the honeyeaters that might do the altitudinal migration from the ranges to the coast and then up the coastal ranges at this time of year. So the series of honeyeaters and the silver eye that we see coming through in autumn and flying back up to the ranges in spring. Here's a closer up of the area that we're looking at today. Again, here's Googong, where we are here on the right. And you can see just up the top there, where we have right at the top of the township of Jerrabomberra abutting on that northern boundary, Fernley Park coming in, rural residential coming into the south boundary as well. And interestingly, what the property, this property or this conservation area, it's got a watershed coming across the middle there. So we've got the drainage to the Queanbeyan River happening to the east. And here's a photo, I'll just go back for a sec. And then we'll look a little bit later at the drainage that's happening to the west. So here's a photo, once again, there's Googong up the top there with the Googong Dam in the background. And this is our main area of the drainage that happens into the Queanbeyan River. And what you can see here, and we'll see in some of the further slides, is that we've got a Barracks Creek drains down through the middle. There are some historical dams there which were built, we think, mostly by soil conservation in the 70s. Again, and the contour banks were all constructed then as well. There's an old residence there, 1880s, I think. And you see at the bottom here is where we've imported some Coursewood Debris into the site. This was taken a couple of years ago. It was during a planting that we were doing. So there's a few tracks that you can see that we were accessing the site, but on a day-to-day basis, there's no vehicle access other than the formed roads and like 2 management tracks. We try and minimise all vehicle access onto the site. Here's just a comparison from last summer to the summer recently. We've got photo monitoring points all over the whole site. So last year, there's smoke, there's almost no water in that wetland area. and it was pretty ferocious, as everybody remembers. This year, to take a photo at that photo monitoring site, I was more than waist deep in water. So great to see that change happening. This is just another couple of shots of that chain of dams, I guess, more, and there's a couple of more natural ponds, the top one on the left there, in that east-facing catchment. And again, here, this is the section between the dams. These are some Eucalyptus rubida, candlebark, just looking pretty amazing this season. These wetlands here that we've got an ephemeral wetlands area, and this year again was full of water, and we had a couple of visitors that we've not seen before. We had a pair of black-fronted dotterels, and we had a Latham snipe, maybe more than one. Super shy. I never got a photo of it. This photo's taken at Jerrabomba Wetlands. But there he was. And we think he's gone now back to Japan or Eastern Asia, where they come from every year, migrate from every year. One of the things that we're adding in particular to this east catchment is nest boxes. A lot of these trees here we think are less than 100 years, probably 70 to 80 years. And so there's maybe half a dozen trees that are older than that. So we're looking at improving habitat by adding nest boxes. This is actually a superb parrot nest box that we're putting up. And this one here is like a wood duck, black duck nest box. We haven't seen superb parrots, but we know that they're coming this way from further west. And the other thing that we're doing at two sites, and one of the sites, and we might see both sites today, is that we're adding what's called Coursewood Debris to the environment here. What was identified as missing from these areas is this ground structure. It's largely the result of people tidying up or collecting firewood over the last 150 years. So these logs have come from two different sites. Some have come from here, from the Gugong development, and some have come from the two major road projects that have been happening recently. So there was a widening of Old Cooma Road and Edwin Land Extension. It's a fraction of the trees they pulled down, but it was good to see that at least some of them we could use to add to the structure here. A couple of wedgies there. The birds love it, and also we've really noticed around the edges where the piles of coarse-woody debris form their own little habitat. You can see here the Chrysocephalum just goes, oh, that's great. There's a bit of water retention here. There's a nice little micro habitat for me to grow. So we're really happy with how they're going. We've also planted trees. These are Blakely's red gum, which are as you probably know, this is box gum grassy woodland, so that's yellow box, Blakely's red gum, both present here at this site. So these were planted nearly 3 years ago now, 2.5 years ago, as part of a 20 million trees project. We had a big job over last summer watering them. It was pretty massive, but they're looking, we're pretty happy with how they're going now. Again, they like this coarse-woody debris. It provides them with a bit of a microclimate, and they connect up patches of existing trees. So here we are back to this slide. So we've looked at the east shedding catchment, and now we're just going to look at the west. So all of this west area here is part of the mid-Jerrabomba Creek catchment. And we've got a series of gullies, with what we call them, a series of catchment sort of flows, which we're looking after. This is an aerial view from Jerrabomba Creek looking east. So Grasshopper Gully, which all going well we'll see today. We've also named after Perunga Grasshopper, which is an endangered ACT grassland species. We also had coarse-woody debris delivered to this site. In total, we had over 50 semi-loads of that coarse-woody debris came on site. And the same here, we've done a planting in amongst the site. This is right at the top of Grasshopper Gully, and you can see it's good. And we've used this coarse-woody debris to form sediment traps as we go down the gully there. This is just a shot of the Coursewood Debris as it looks recently, and again we've got Blakelies growing up through that. Scarlet robins, so the birds really like this ground structure that we've provided. This is further down in Grasshopper Gully. This is what we call Grasshopper Dam. Just pretty pictures at the bottom, but just interestingly at the top there, the photo on the left there, you can see that sort of skid marks coming down into the dam. That was, and there are some other photos a little bit later on. We had an inch of hail in January last year. It was a significant event. And this is like we had these sort of glaciations came down all of the hillsides and came down the gully, where we had big piles of hail like this, just sliding down the hill over country that was very dry and denuded. So we had a few issues stemming from that. This is the other site, which, all going well, we'll have a look at today. This is just below that Grasshopper Dam, and we think that it's really it's because the dam is there that we're having these issues down from the dam. There's a leak or something that's coming out at this point, which is not used to having water. The dam's been there for a long time, and we're getting this sodic soil kind of dissolving. So we've done mostly, I think, what you would call soft work here. We've added brush packs. You can see a line of brush packs uphill from that. And we've added, I was trying to think, maybe 200 straw bales to that site sequentially. So we started off, then we added more, we've added more, and every year, or every time I think it needs it, we're adding more to that. But what we're seeing, and these are taken just the other day, what I'm really liking about the work that we've done here is that we seem to have changed the slope of the face of that hotspot from near vertical, slowly, and as soon as it gets to a certain point, which probably is the point that matches the slope of the hillside, we find that the erosion stops. So just adding hay bales to that, and there's planting, lots and lots of just branches have been added to that site, and we've done some planting. So here we've got Carex suppressor planted in this area here. Okay, so moving along to the next gully along, Niger Gully. I mean, every sort of site that we have, some of it's the same and some of it's a bit different. So and again, this was a site that was severely denuded during the dry period, and in particular, we got a very active wombat happening there. And what we were finding is that, especially over that really dry, that the wombat was, every single little bit of poa that was left on that site, he was digging up. And the carex. So we were losing all of our poa, which used to be completely fill this sort of valley here. So what we did here in particular, we added some packing crates to the site, and you'll see on that, this is an existing poa, and we've tried to put those packing crates over the little stump of poa that was left to protect it from the wombats. And in this particular spot, we've also done a planting of lomandra there as well. So really that's, all of these sort of actions are to act as, I guess, as debris traps, to minimise the flow. The old adage is to keep the water in the landscape rather than having it all running down the hill. And this has been quite successful. It's always hard to tell with this because we've had such a good season following a really bad season, but we're really happy with how these sites are going. This is a little bit further down, Niger Gully, and we've also got a pretty significant hotspot here. So what we did with that is, and we've used these elsewhere, is we've used these end rolls of netting, and we just form them into an end roll of 40 mil netting, and we put it across. And again, the idea there is that it's acting as a debris trap. So you can see the dates. That was pretty much after the very first rainfall we had. Then spring last year, and then just last week, it's really settled down into a much more stable structure. Here in this one, This is one of our mammal monitoring sites, so it's a photo monitoring site there. We've also got reptile tiles out there as well. This is a little swamp wallaby with a joey taken at that site there. So getting down closer towards the creek, Plum Gully, named after, this is a giant plum tree here, which is forming such a good, or it's performing such a good job at the sort of at the mouth of that gully that we're really hesitant to take it out. But similar work that we did here, we added these rolls of netting as sediment traps. These are the before photos, and these are photos that were taken just last week. Same sort of thing, really do a really good job keeping debris in the system rather than sending it all back out to the creek. And here the plantings that we did were mostly juncus. So a very successful planting happening in that little sort of deposit there of sand. But it's a little bit weedy here as well. But you'll see that the juncus and the other things have formed a really good mat helping to stabilise that site there. This is just coming into Jerrabomba Creek, which is just behind there. Ditto, just some before and after photos of one of the other sort of gully areas. This is an area where we've mostly done planting trees. The idea being, again, provide some sort of surface to stabilise the gully, plus provide an area that especially small birds in this sort of circumstance can use to move them so they can move around the landscape. So here looking at Jerrabomba Creek looking west. So this is Tuggeranong behind there, behind those hills there. Here's Jerrabomba Creek, and here we have what we call Old Pops Creek going up there. Old Pops Creek, it's still in cattle grazing country, but what we've done here, there's a couple of exclosures that we've set up as part of the Saving Our Species Scarlet Robin project. So this area of Old Pops Creek is now been fenced off from the cattle, and we've added these Coursewood Debris. Same theory again, is to provide a sediment trap, keep the water in the landscape. All of those sort of principles come into play. This is a dam as part of that, the work that we're doing on Old Pops Creek. This was actually part of a Banks to Bush Riparian Linkages project. So there's an alternative water source was funded so that we could keep the cattle out of both Jerrabomba Creek and Old Pops Creek. So 2017, then 3 anxious years of waiting to see if the dam would actually fill. It stayed empty for all that time, and we just thought that it's never going to happen. But then this season, the dam's full. We did a big planting around the edges of it. We added some of this Coursewood debris, and found that it looks pretty amazing now. So I think that's March that photo was taken. So we've provided some really good habitat around the edge of this dam. The cattle are actually mostly excluded from this dam. This kind of interesting arrangement here is that's the watering point for the cattle. So they're only able to access that point of the dam. They're not able to access around the rest of the edge of the dam. And then we come to Jerrabomba Creek itself. Pretty spectacular where we are. It's not the same as the little meandering creek that you see coming into Fishwick, which is pretty flat and quite open. Here we've got some substantial cliffs. So these are, 100-metre high cliffs here, big serpentine folds of the creek. It's a pretty nice spot. So this is just going back to this hailstorm that we had in January last year. And you can see here the hail. You can see also here are the marks coming down the hillside of where the hail, it really scoured it out. And here are the hail tracks coming down the hillside. So it was this incredible, and it stripped the tree guards off trees and everything in its path. And there are still, not so much now, but there are still some areas where you can see that scar going down the hillside. And this is what it dumped into Jerra Creek. So we had a period of Jerra Creek where the creek was not very good, was really anoxic, and we don't know we actually don't know the long-term effects of that, but we had a pretty tough time. The cumbungi, you can see here, provided it's a really good, like a stabiliser and a water filter, and here's cumbungi more recently, looking quite healthy. Yeah, so we had a pretty bad sort of month or so with the creek looking pretty bad. Just a comment on the turtles that we have. So one of the things that we've done here, and you'll see when we're out there later today, we're working on building a conservation fence, like the work at Mulligan's, and I know some of the work at Jerrabomba Wetlands as well. We're keeping a close eye on our turtles. And what we're finding is that, especially after that really, really dry period, and in consultation with Laurie Gould, who's done work at Jerrabomba Wetlands, we know that if there's a really dry period and there's not much water in the dams, as soon as you get a rainfall event, the turtles are going to be moving around. So that's what we found here. We had two, after a very, very dry period here, we had two quite big rainfall events, and we would look for turtles, 17 turtles along the fence line the first time we checked, and 13 turtles the second time, both after those quite significant rainfall events. They were all turtles that were coming down this eastern catchment, and the recommendation was that we pick them up, and they're moving downhill to the next water source. So they got released in Gugong Dam. Since then, we do regular turtle patrols after any kind of rainfall event. We've only ever found 2 turtles. So it was significant, that a really dry period followed by some rain. And it's good to see we do have some breeding at home, so they're not all being eaten by foxes. This is just a couple of shots of the creek, just before and after. Before the rain, just after the first lot of rain, and then this is last year and then this year. So we've done a considerable riparian planting along the creek. A little bit weedy in this spot. Again, this is a bit of a wombat zone, hotel, something. And they cause a bit of havoc, as everybody knows, I guess. This just gives an idea of the 2 stages of this project. So this is the first stage, and we're planting along the creek, but also planting up these gullies as well. This is the second stage, where we were mostly doing infill around the creek and up Old Pops Creek, which is up here. So again, some before and after. One of the other things that we've done along this section one of the first things that we did was to do some willow control. The willows were not too bad, so it was a really good opportunity to get rid of them. So we've taken out, or we didn't take them out. They were sprayed, and some were injected, stem injection, bit of a mix, all along the creek. Interestingly, the dead willows were there until those rainfall events at the beginning of last year, and then in sort of maybe 2 or 3 big events, and most of those dead willows have now been taken and deposited further down the creek. There's actually a big area there. But all going well here, and we think it is going well. We've got some great wattle growth. We've got Eucalyptus melliodora. We think 100% survival, even over that really dry period. And some casuarina, some river casuarinas, which are just starting to come up here and replacing the willows functionally. So these are just some shots along the creek. Acacia rubida, they're all local species. They're all species that from the sites where we plant, we can look around and see those species growing. So Acacia rubida's been absolutely fantastic. The creek here is bottlebrush riparian shrubland is what it's classified as. So we've got, these are more wattles, but the smaller shrubs along here, you can't actually see them very well in this shot, are Callistemon seaberi. So we've done a lot of planting of Callistemon seaberi there as well. Wattles, it's interesting at that section of the creek, there's quite a steep hillside. You can see this hillside here. so super steep coming down to the creek. So in this little section right at the bottom of the hill, there's really nice soil and some good moisture, and we've had some good success with the plantings that we've done there. Here are the casuarinas. They were underwater a month ago when we had 4 inches with that pulse of rain that came through. So they've done really well. But really the standout in some ways along the creek is the cumbungi, is the typhus species that we've got growing there. It withstands considerable water flows, bends right over, that comes back up again. It's providing a really important stabilising of the creek bed there. We've heard that it's really important with nitrogen fixation. I think it has a really good sort of nutrient recycling point of view function as well as a sediment trap. So not so much in this photo, but we're really happy with the cumbungi growth all along the creek. And obviously it's not just me. There's lots of people that come out. We've got a ranger group that comes out once a month to help with things, but these are all the various sort of plantings and groups that we've had along the creek, and more broadly, but especially along the creek. So really happy to have these people involved, and we feel that we're getting some quite good results from that. So just to finish off, this again is one of the photo points down at the creek, and it's pretty self-explanatory. So March 2017, so 4 years ago, you can see the willows along the creek. Then summer last year, pretty dry, pretty smoky, but then huge response from this La Nina. And these wattles growing here, we've got Meliodora all along here, the cumbungi here, big wattle growth happening here. So pretty happy with that sort of response that we've had over the 4 years of this particular part of the project. Okay, that's it for me.